For as long as I can remember, I believed family meant putting their needs above your own. I thought love was measured by how much you were willing to give, how much you were willing to endure, and how often you could show up when no one else would. I had built my life on that belief quietly, steadfastly, and, as I would later discover, tragically. I was 27 when my father first called me about the bakery. It wasn't just any bakery, it was the Holt Family Bakery, a modest little shop on the corner of our old neighborhood in Brooklyn. My grandfather built it with his bare hands after immigrating from Italy, pouring decades of sweat into its worn wooden counters and hand-painted signage. My father had run it most of his life, but sales had been slipping, the bills were piling up, and the mortgage was suffocating him. "We might lose it, Cass," he said over the phone, his voice trembling in a way that I wasn't used to hearing. "Your mother and we're not sure how to keep it going." I didn't hesitate. There wasn't a second of doubt in me. "I'll help," I said immediately, sitting at my desk in my small Manhattan apartment, the city skyline blurring behind my tears. At that time, I was just beginning to build my career in corporate finance. I wasn't wealthy. I wasn't even comfortable yet. But I was always the responsible one, the fixer. My parents had said that about me since I was little. Cassandra always figures it out. They called me the independent one, the strong one, and somewhere along the way, I internalized that it meant I wasn't allowed to need anything in return. So, I quietly rerouted my budget, the down payment I was saving for my first condo gone, the vacation I'd been planning with my friends canceled. I started sending money every month to cover the bakery's mortgage. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was the right thing to do. But deep down, I was also carrying the unspoken hope that one day this bakery, the very symbol of our family's heritage, would be something I could preserve, something we could share. I never asked for acknowledgement. I never demanded repayment. I just wanted my parents to know I was there, to feel that my sacrifices mattered. The bakery became my silent project. I'd visit on weekends, sometimes taking the early train from the city just to mop the floors before the morning rush. I repainted the storefront one summer with my own hands when the old paint started to peel. My father would always pat my back and say, "You've always had a good head on your shoulders, Cass. Your brother could learn from you." Ah, Dylan. The golden boy, the dreamer, the one who failed upward in life, constantly crashing his car, quitting jobs, and bouncing from one get-rich-quick scheme to another. My parents always found ways to excuse his recklessness. "He's just figuring things out," they would say. "He needs more time." Time, money, second chances. Dylan always had them. I used to tell myself I didn't resent him. I wanted to believe that my love for my family was unconditional, that my giving didn't come with strings. But even as I kept writing those checks and picking up the pieces of their financial mess, there was a quiet ache in me that I buried so deep I forgot it existed. 6 years went by, 6 years of sacrificing my weekends, my vacations, my savings, 6 years of thinking I was doing something noble keeping the family legacy alive. I told myself that one day, maybe when Dad retired, the bakery would be ours. Maybe Dylan and I could run it together. Maybe, just maybe, I was building something for both of us. But the thing about unspoken expectations is that they're dangerous. They grow in the shadows of what's never said, feeding off assumptions and quiet hopes until they become the foundation of your decisions. I never once asked my parents what they planned to do with the bakery long term. I assumed we all shared the same vision that family would always mean mutual respect and shared futures. I didn't realize that in their eyes. My sacrifices were just the natural order of things. After all, I was the strong one. I didn't need to be rewarded. I didn't need to be consulted. Looking back now, I can see the slow unraveling. The signs were there the way my mother brushed off my suggestions about modernizing the bakery's marketing. The way my father hesitated when I asked about transferring partial ownership into my name. But at the time, I ignored those things. I trusted them. That's what hurts the most. You know, it wasn't the money. It wasn't the lost weekends or the canceled vacations. It was the trust. The quiet, sacred belief that my love, my loyalty, and my sacrifices actually meant something to them. I gave everything I had to protect our family's home, our family's story, and I had no idea what it would cost me. But I would soon find out. Growing up in the Holt family, favoritism wasn't something anyone ever admitted. It wasn't written on a chalkboard or spoken out loud across the dinner table. It was the silent current that ran beneath our home unseen, but strong enough to pull me under for years without me realizing I was drowning. My brother, Dylan, has always had a certain charm. He knew how to make people laugh, how to light up a room, how to convince you if only for a moment that he had everything under control. And my parents adored him for it. They called him their adventurous spirit when he skipped classes in high school, when he wrecked his first car. They told him, "It's just part of growing up." When he got fired from his first job for showing up late, my father laughed it off, saying, "Some bosses just don't know how to manage free thinkers." Me, I was the planner, the quiet one, the kid who did everything right the first time, so no one would have to clean up after me. I stayed out of trouble. I made straight A's. I was the one my parents could count on because I never gave them a reason to worry. And somewhere along the way, that became my curse. I don't think my parents ever intended to divide us. But they did. They built a different set of expectations for each of us, brick by brick, year after year. Dylan was the one who needed support, grace, and second chances. I was the one who was fine. I was self-sufficient, independent, resilient, their words, not mine. They used those words like compliments, like badges of honor they pinned to me so they wouldn't feel guilty about always showing up for Dylan instead. It started small, things you could almost dismiss as coincidence. On Dylan's 16th birthday, he got a used Jeep. On mine, I got driving lessons. When I was choosing colleges, I worked 3 part-time jobs to cover what scholarships didn't. When Dylan went to a private university and flunked out in his second year, my parents quietly paid off his remaining tuition and called it a learning experience. I told myself I didn't mind. I told myself I was proud to stand on my own. But there were nights, quiet ones, where no one was watching when the loneliness crept in like a slow leak. I would lie awake in my tiny dorm room, staring at the cracked ceiling tiles, wondering what it would feel like to be the one they worried about for a change. But I buried that feeling. I buried it deep. Dylan's life, on the surface, always seemed like a vibrant painting, colorful, exciting, full of possibility. Mine was practical, steady, calculated. He chased startups, real estate flips, cryptocurrency trends, and passion projects that lasted 3 months before collapsing. He was always between things, between jobs, between relationships, between moves, and somehow, no matter how many times he fell, my parents were there with outstretched arms, ready to catch him. When Dylan needed help covering his rent, my parents sent him checks without hesitation. When his credit cards maxed out, they bailed him out quietly. When he called my mother in tears after yet another failed venture, she drove 3 hours just to spend a weekend cooking his favorite meals. I can't tell you how many times I've heard the phrase, "Dylan just needs a little more support. He's figuring it out." As if figuring things out was some privilege reserved only for him. I never got to figure it out. I didn't get a financial safety net or a soft place to land. I built my net from scratch, woven with my own late nights, my own exhaustion, my own silent determination to never need anyone. The double standard wasn't always about money, Sometimes it was about time, attention, concern. When I'd call home to talk about a promotion or a new apartment, the conversation would drift always back to Dylan. "That's great, Cass. But did you know Dylan's thinking of launching his own business? We're so proud of him for trying." Even my successes were a backdrop for his next chance. I started to realize that, to my parents, Dylan's potential was always more valuable than my achievements. But the hardest part? I loved him. Despite everything, I still loved him. I still wanted him to succeed. I still wanted him to be okay. I didn't want him to fail. I just wanted to matter as much as he did. I think that's what hurt the most. This quiet, aching question that lived inside me for years. What would it take for me to be the one they chose? When I stepped in to save the family bakery, I thought maybe this was my moment. Maybe this was where I'd finally earn that place, not just as the reliable daughter, but as someone they would stand behind, fight for, protect. But that was my mistake. Because what I didn't understand then is that when a family builds their love on the idea that one child needs more, the other child will always get less. And I had spent my whole life quietly accepting less. The day I found out about the bakery was one of those moments that doesn't just break your heart, it rewrites it. You walk into a room believing you know your place in the world, and when you walk out, everything you thought was solid has cracked beneath your feet. It was a Sunday afternoon in late September. The kind of crisp fall day where the streets are lined with amber leaves and coffee shops hum with quiet conversations. I remember I had just finished showing a property in the Upper West Side when my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. "Family dinner tonight, 6 p.m. Big news, bring your appetite." The words seemed harmless, ordinary, even, and part of me felt a flicker of warmth. Maybe we were finally celebrating something good. Maybe it was about the bakery. Maybe, after years of sacrifice, they were finally going to tell me they'd decided to bring me into the ownership officially. I spent the subway ride rehearsing the possible ways they might say it. Maybe my dad would hand me a set of keys. Maybe my mom would wrap her arms around me and tell me they'd been waiting for the right time. I wanted to believe this was finally the moment I'd matter just as much as Dylan. When I walked into the house, the scent of roasted chicken filled the air, and my mom was busy setting the table with her best china, the kind she usually reserved for holidays. My dad greeted me with a kiss on the cheek and a rare sparkle in his eyes. I noticed Dylan already sitting at the table, scrolling on his phone, unusually relaxed. We ate dinner like we always did, easy conversation, light teasing, updates about work. I was about to ask what the big news was when my dad cleared his throat, looking briefly at my mom before turning to Dylan. "Your mother and I have been thinking a lot about the future of the bakery," he began, his voice steady but strangely distant. "We've decided it's time to pass it on. It needs new energy, new ideas." I smiled, nodding. "I completely agree. I've actually been thinking of a few ways to—" "We've signed it over to Dylan," he said, cutting me off. For a moment, the words didn't process. I actually thought I misheard him. "I'm sorry, what—" He repeated it, slowly this time. "The bakery is Dylan's now. It's official. We finalized the paperwork last week." My mother chimed in, her tone overly bright, as if she were trying to soften the blow. "It's such a good opportunity for your brother. He's been looking for something stable, something meaningful." I sat there, frozen, my fork halfway to my mouth. I must have looked ridiculous, just suspended in that moment like I was holding my breath underwater. I forced myself to ask, "Did you think to talk to me about this even once?" My father's gaze flickered toward his plate. "We didn't want to burden you. You're busy with your career. You have your own life." I looked at Dylan, waiting for him to say something, anything, but he just shrugged, offering a half smile like this was some casual family decision. not a gut punch to the person who had kept that place afloat for 6 years. The betrayal settled over me slowly, like the suffocating weight of snow piling up until you can't breathe. I thought about every payment I'd made, every weekend I'd spent scrubbing those counters, every night I stayed awake figuring out how to cover the mortgage when my own rent was due. I thought about the years I'd sacrificed not for a return, but for recognition, some shred of acknowledgement that my efforts mattered, that I was part of something we were building together. And they had simply given it away. I pushed my chair back, my heartbeat loud in my ears. You mean to tell me that after all this time, all the money, all the work, I didn't even deserve a conversation? My mother's smile faltered. We thought you'd understand. Understand. Understand what? That I was expected to give endlessly without question. That being the responsible child meant I had no right to claim anything for myself. My dad sighed like he was exhausted by my reaction. Cass, it's just a building. What matters is that we're family. But it wasn't just a building. It was the legacy I'd been pouring myself into. It was the promise I thought we were silently making to each other with every check I sent, every mile I traveled, every part of my life I put on hold. You're right, I said quietly, my throat tightening. It's just a building, and maybe I've been the fool for thinking I was part of it. I grabbed my coat and left before they could say another word. I needed air. I needed distance. I walked for blocks, past the park, past the storefronts glowing in the evening light, past people laughing over dinner at sidewalk cafes. I kept walking until my feet ached, and even then, I didn't stop. That night, something inside me cracked something I hadn't even realized I'd been holding together all these years. I had believed, deep down, that if I gave enough, worked enough, loved enough, I would eventually be chosen, that I would finally matter. But I was wrong. In their eyes, I was strong, and strong people don't need to be chosen. Strong people are just expected to keep giving. I didn't go back to my parents' house for nearly 2 weeks after the dinner where my world came undone. I ignored their calls. I let Dylan's texts pile up, all filled with vague pleasantries like nothing had happened. I needed space to untangle the storm inside me, space to decide whether I wanted to scream or vanish entirely. But silence couldn't last forever. One Sunday morning, I found myself standing outside their house, the weight of everything pressing against my ribs like I couldn't take a full breath. I didn't come looking for an apology. I came for answers. I wanted them to say it out loud. I wanted to hear them justify it, to admit that somewhere along the way, they had decided my loyalty came with no price. When my mother opened the door, she looked genuinely surprised to see me. Oh, Cassandra, I thought you were busy with work. Can we talk? I interrupted, stepping past her before she could offer excuses. Dad here. She hesitated but nodded. He's in the living room. I found him lounging in his worn recliner, flipping through the Sunday paper as if nothing in our family had fractured just days earlier. He set the paper down when he saw me. Hey, Cass, how's work? I didn't exchange pleasantries. Why didn't you talk to me about the bakery? Why did you think it was okay to hand it over to Dylan without even asking how I felt? He sighed, like I was being difficult. We didn't think you'd want to get tied down with it. You have your career. You're successful. Dylan needs something to stabilize him. There it was, the story they always told themselves. I was fine. I didn't need anything. I didn't need to be asked. But I've been paying for it, I said, my voice tight, trying to hold back the rising wave of anger. I've been covering the mortgage, the repairs, the taxes. Did you forget that? You chose to do that, my mother interjected, her voice carefully calm but laced with something sharp. We never forced you. You were just helping family. Helping family. I repeated those words in my head like they were a joke. Family. The magical shield that excused any injustice, any betrayal. You told me it was an investment in my future, I said, staring at my father. You said, the bakery will always be yours someday. I believed you. Plans change, he said, as if that erased the years I'd poured into them. Melissa. Dylan, I snapped, cutting him off. His name is Dylan, and I'm not doing this dance where you all pretend it makes sense. My mother crossed her arms, her patience slipping. Your brother needs this more than you. You're already stable. You have your own condo. You have your career. This is Dylan's chance to build something. And what about what I've built? What about what I gave up? The vacations I canceled? The property I didn't buy because I was paying your bills? What about the 6 years I gave to keep this family afloat? Her expression hardened. That was your choice. We never asked you to sacrifice. The words landed like a punch to the stomach. It's always the same when you're the one who shows up, when you're the one who handles things, the one who takes responsibility suddenly. Your effort is optional. Your giving becomes invisible. The people you're holding up act like you were just lifting them for fun. I felt something inside me calcify, something that had been soft for too long. Let me be very clear, I said, my voice trembling not from weakness, but from years of swallowed hurt finally breaking free. I'm done. I will not be contributing another cent to this family. Not to the bakery, not to your bills, not to Dylan's next disaster. You've made it clear that my effort doesn't matter, that my loyalty doesn't buy me a voice, so I won't be spending it here anymore. You're overreacting, my dad muttered, running a hand through his thinning hair. Am I asked, because it seems pretty clear to me. You've made your choice, and I'm making mine. I turned to leave, my mother's voice trailing after me. Cassandra, don't let money come between family. I paused at the door, steadying my breath before looking back at her. This isn't about money. It never was. It's about respect. Something you've never felt I deserved. Her face crumpled slightly, but I didn't wait for a response. I walked out, my heart beat loud in my ears, each step away from that house feeling heavier than the last, but somehow also lighter. On the train ride home, I kept thinking about how often we tell ourselves that love means sacrifice, that family means saying yes even when it hurts. I had believed that all my life. But maybe love isn't endless giving. Maybe love is knowing when to stop giving to the people who only know how to take. And maybe, just maybe, saying no is the truest form of self-respect I've ever known. The days after I walked out of my parents' house felt strangely quiet, as if I had stepped into a life that wasn't mine. For so long, my energy had been tangled in their needs, their emergencies, their expectations. I had spent years responding to their calls, moving money around to solve their problems, calculating how to cover their shortfalls while quietly postponing my own dreams. When I finally said no, when I finally set the boundary I should have set years ago, something inside me collapsed and expanded at the same time. I was exhausted, but I could also breathe. I expected my parents to push back. I expected guilt trips, tears, angry voicemails, but instead, they went silent. Completely, deafeningly silent. I should have known the silence wasn't peace, it was calculation. It took less than a month for the first financial fire to spark. My mom called one morning, her tone light, like nothing had changed. Hi, sweetheart. I was wondering if you could help us with the car insurance this month. It's just a little tight since we're helping Dylan get the bakery ready. I let the silence stretch between us. Mom, I said I wouldn't be contributing anymore. Her voice faltered for a second, but quickly recovered. Oh, of course. I just thought, well, I just assumed you'd want to help. It's just this one time. It's never just one time. It's a pattern, and I had finally stepped outside of it. No, Mom, I'm serious. I'm done. You need to work this out without me. She didn't argue. She simply sighed and hung up, and that's when the calls really started to slow. There's this hollow ache when you realize that much of your family's relationship with you was transactional, that you were more valuable to them as a safety net than as a daughter. When the net disappears, so does the closeness. I started to notice I wasn't invited to as many family dinners. When I did show up, conversations were stiffer, shorter, filled with awkward pauses. Dylan barely looked me in the eye. My mother would plaster on a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. My father stuck to safe topics: the weather, the neighborhood, baseball scores. They never openly blamed me, but the distance between us said enough. But the thing is, I didn't miss their needs. I didn't miss the scrambling to fix what they broke. What I missed was the version of family I had convinced myself we were, the family I had fought to protect, the family I wanted us to be. That version never really existed. Setting boundaries didn't immediately bring peace. At first, it brought guilt. Heavy, lingering guilt. I questioned myself constantly. Was I being selfish? Was I really turning my back on my family? Did I owe them more, simply because they raised me? But as time passed, the guilt started to loosen its grip. I began to fill the space they used to occupy with things I had long neglected. I joined a local book club I'd always been too busy to attend. I picked up painting again, a hobby I had abandoned in college when life got too serious. I finally booked the trip to Vancouver I had postponed 3 years in a row because of family emergencies that now, looking back, didn't feel like emergencies at all. I even started building new friendships, deeper ones. People who didn't expect me to show up only when they needed something. People who valued my presence, not my problem-solving skills. Work became a sanctuary, not just a distraction. I took on new clients, challenged myself to pursue leadership roles, and expanded my own investment portfolio projects I had shelved for years in favor of supporting my parents. The more I built a life separate from them, the clearer I saw the trap I had been stuck in. It wasn't that I had a family who used me maliciously. It was that I had a family who assumed my love meant unlimited access, and I was the one who had trained them to expect it. I had never said no, until I did. And when I finally did, the world didn't fall apart. Their worlds shifted. Yes, but mine grew. Still, the occasional text would come. Hey, your brother's trying to get the bakery certified for catering. Do you think you could help with some of the paperwork? You're so good at these things. I would reply simply, I can't. Best of luck. Each time I said no, the weight lifted a little more. I realized that boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're bridges you can control access to. They're a way of saying, you can come this far, but no further. You can be part of my life, but not at the cost of myself. Learning to say no to my family wasn't about shutting them out. It was about finally letting myself in. And somewhere in that quiet space I created, I found the version of myself I'd been waiting for. Not the fixer. Not the fallback. Not the tireless giver. Just me, whole, worthy, enough, without conditions. For a while, the silence felt permanent. After I stopped supporting my parents financially, the calls became sparse, the texts mechanical, and the family gatherings noticeably more awkward. It almost felt like we had quietly agreed to drift apart. Like ships that used to share the same harbor, but now sailed in different directions. I had just started to get comfortable with the distance when, months later, the inevitable happened. They came back. It started with a voicemail from my father, his voice carrying that artificially calm tone I knew too well. Hey, Cass, it's Dad. Just checking in. We should catch up soon. Maybe dinner this weekend. There's something your mom and I want to talk to you about. I didn't call back right away. Something about his voice made my stomach twist. It wasn't curiosity. It was dread. When someone's pattern is to only reach out when they need something, you eventually stop wondering if this time is different. 2 days later, a text from my mother followed. Your brother is facing some challenges with the bakery. Maybe you can stop by. We miss you. I stared at the message for a long time, the weight of it pressing into me like the echo of an old wound. Challenges was a soft word, a placeholder for the house of cards is falling. I didn't respond. Part of me wanted to pretend I didn't see it. Another part of me wanted to march over there and finally say, I told you this would happen. But the thing about love, even damaged love, is that it doesn't disappear cleanly. It lingers like a bruise under the skin, aching even when you think you've healed. A week later, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I wasn't surprised to see my parents standing there on my porch, holding a box of pastries from the bakery, as if a peace offering could erase the history between us. Hi, sweetheart, my mom said, too brightly. We just thought we'd drop by. I let them in, mostly because slamming the door would have felt like a war I wasn't ready to fight. They sat in my kitchen, carefully avoiding eye contact, filling the room with small talk until my father finally got to the point. The bakery's struggling, he admitted. Dylan's a bit over his head. He's behind on taxes, payroll, and, well, everything. We were hoping you might be able to help. Help? The word was a loaded grenade now. I crossed my arms, leaning against the counter, staring at them without a hint of the automatic yes I used to carry like a reflex. How exactly did you think I could help? Maybe just a temporary loan, my mom suggested, her voice carefully sweet. You know the ins and outs of this stuff. You've always been so good at cleaning things up. There it was, the familiar narrative. I was the fixer, the reliable one, the one who could always be counted on to pull them out of the hole they dug. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. But instead, I spoke plainly. I told you I was done. My mother's smile flickered, but didn't fully fade. But this is different. This is about family legacy. We all want to see the bakery survive. No, I corrected, my voice steady. You wanted Dylan to have the bakery. You made that choice without me. You handed it to him like I never existed. You can't just invite me back now that it's falling apart and expect me to clean it up. My father's jaw tightened. We thought you'd care enough to help. I do care. I cared so much that I spent years holding that place together when nobody else would. And you made it clear I didn't matter in that equation. So now, you need to figure it out without me. The silence that followed was sharp, painful, but necessary. You're really going to turn your back on your brother? My father finally asked. I looked at them, not with anger, but with the exhaustion of someone who had finally put the burden down. No, I'm just finally turning toward myself. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the pull to rescue them. I didn't feel guilty for saying no. I didn't feel like I owed them more pieces of myself. They left shortly after, the box of pastries still sitting untouched on my counter. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the box until the frosting wilted and the pastries hardened. Maybe they thought the sweets would soften me, remind me of the family I used to believe we were. But the truth is, I wasn't that girl anymore. I had learned something that no one had ever taught me. You can love people and still refuse to save them. You can care and still choose yourself. You can walk away not out of spite but out of survival. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is to stay gone. They didn't give up easily. A few days after my parents left my house, the calls started again this time, with a more desperate edge. Voicemails that started with, "We just want to talk," and slowly turned into, "We really need you to reconsider." I ignored most of them. I had drawn my line. And this time, I wasn't stepping over it, not for them, not for Dylan, not even for the version of myself that once craved their approval. But the final confrontation came sooner than I expected. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when they showed up at my office. My assistant knocked gently on my door. "Your parents are here. They don't have an appointment, but they said it's urgent." For a moment, I considered telling her to send them away. I had every right to, but something in me needed this to face it. Fully. Without avoidance. "Send them in," I said, closing my laptop. They walked in together, my mother holding a folder clutched to her chest like it might protect her from what she already knew I would say. My father spoke first. "We've been thinking about solutions. We found a way to keep the bakery if you can help us cover the back taxes. Just a loan. 6 months at most." My mother jumped in quickly. "We could even offer you partial ownership now. It would be yours and Dylan's." The irony wasn't lost on me. Now that the bakery was sinking, now that the reality of poor management had hit them hard, I was suddenly worth involving. I folded my hands calmly on the desk. "You want me to invest in a sinking ship. The same ship you told me I didn't belong on when it was sailing just fine." "It wasn't like that," my father protested. "We just wanted to help Dylan get on his feet." "And how's that working out for him?" I asked, not to be cruel, but to hold a mirror to what they were still refusing to face. My mother's voice wavered. "We thought we were doing the right thing. Families support each other." "No," I said firmly, my voice more steady than I expected. "What you did was choose. You chose Dylan. You chose to dismiss my sacrifices. And now that it's inconvenient, you want to rewrite the terms." They both looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language, as if the girl who used to bend for them, used to bleed for them, had been replaced by someone they didn't know. I pushed the folder gently back across the desk. "I'm not going to save you from the consequences of your choices." My father's jaw tightened. "You're being cold. Cassandra." "No, I'm being clear," I corrected. "I spent years pretending that love meant constant sacrifice. I've learned that real love, healthy love, doesn't ask you to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm." The air in the room thickened. I could feel them scrambling, searching for another angle. "We'll lose the bakery," my mother whispered. "It's our family's legacy." "You already gave that legacy away," I said softly. "I was never part of it. Remember..." The truth settled between us like a weight none of us wanted to carry. My father straightened his shoulders. "So that's it. You're walking away from us?" I looked him in the eyes, not with anger, but with a quiet, aching resolve. "I'm not walking away from you. I'm walking toward myself." I stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "I hope you figure something out. I really do. But I won't be the solution this time." For the first time in my life, I saw the flicker of real understanding in my father's expression, not agreement, not acceptance, but a recognition that the daughter who always said yes had finally, irrevocably, said no. They left without another word. I sat back down at my desk, my heart pounding in my chest, my hands shaking but beneath the adrenaline. There was something else. Relief? The decision didn't come without pain. Even as I sat in the silence of my office, I could feel the familiar guilt scratching at the edges of my resolve. But guilt isn't always the same as wrongdoing. Sometimes guilt is just the echo of old conditioning. And this time, I chose not to let it control me. The fallout was immediate. Dylan sent me a string of angry texts, accusing me of abandoning the family, calling me selfish, throwing words at me that used to cut deep but now barely made a scratch. Extended family members began to call, pressuring me to make things right. They only knew my parents' version of the story, the carefully curated one where I was the daughter who turned her back on them. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't need to anymore. Instead, I did something I had never done before. I blocked the calls. I muted the noise. I reclaimed the space in my life that had always been overrun by other people's emergencies. I spent the next weekend at my lake cabin, the one place that had always felt fully mine. No one else's demands, no one else's burdens. Just me, the quiet, and the slow healing process of remembering who I was before I became the family's safety net. That weekend, I realized something profound. My parents didn't have to understand my boundaries for them to be valid. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their permission. I only needed to choose myself, and this time, I had. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges. Months passed after that final confrontation. The phone calls stopped. The guilt trips faded. I stopped waiting for an apology that wasn't coming. I stopped expecting them to understand why I had walked away. And slowly, I began to build a life that wasn't wrapped around their needs. I thought the distance would feel like loneliness, but what I found was freedom. I poured myself into my career, not as an escape, but as a declaration. I wanted to prove to myself more than anyone that I could build something that was mine, something no one could take away or diminish. Within a year, I earned a promotion that once felt out of reach. I purchased my first investment property, a small but beautiful apartment I renovated with my own hands. I started saying yes to things I had always put off: art classes, spontaneous weekend trips, quiet mornings with coffee, and no one else's demands waiting for me. It felt strange at first, to live without the constant weight of someone else's crisis pressing on my chest. It felt lighter, but it also felt unfamiliar, like walking in a city I had always passed through but never actually explored. Then one day, I received a letter, not a call, not a text, but a handwritten letter from my father. It wasn't long, but it was honest. He admitted he had been wrong. He acknowledged that in their desperation to support Dylan, they had dismissed me, used me, and assumed I would always be there to clean up the mess. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for help. He simply asked if I would meet him for coffee. I agreed, but I did it on my terms. We met at a quiet cafe near my office. He looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but something in his posture had shifted. The first thing he said to me was, "Your mother won't be joining us. She's not quite ready to have this conversation." I appreciated the honesty more than I expected. He told me that Dylan had officially closed the bakery 2 months earlier. He couldn't keep it afloat. The shop that had survived 3 generations was now just an empty building waiting to be leased. My father said it like he was still trying to swallow the weight of that reality. "I thought saving the bakery would save the family," he said quietly. "But I think we lost both when we stopped seeing you." His words landed somewhere deep inside me, somewhere still tender. I didn't rush to forgive him. I didn't reach across the table or promise to start over immediately. I listened. I let him speak. And I told him plainly, "I'm willing to build something new with you, but I won't go back to what we were. I can't." He nodded. And for the first time, I think he truly understood that I meant it. Rebuilding a relationship isn't as cinematic as people think. It's not a grand apology with swelling music in the background. It's small, awkward coffee dates. It's short, honest phone calls. It's testing the waters, slowly, with new boundaries in place. Over time, my father and I found a rhythm that worked. We met once a month. We stayed away from conversations that reopened old wounds. We didn't pretend everything was fine, but we didn't let the past dictate every interaction. My mother eventually reached out, but the distance between us lingered longer. She struggled with accountability. She wanted to skip over the hard parts and return to holiday dinners as if nothing had happened. I didn't let her. I explained that healing wasn't a shortcut. It required acknowledgement, not avoidance. She didn't like it, but she heard me, and sometimes that's enough to keep the door open. Dylan and I drifted apart. Our relationship now reduced to polite birthday texts and brief conversations at distant family gatherings. He never apologized. I stopped expecting him to. Some relationships heal. Some don't. Some are better left in the polite distance where they can't hurt you anymore. What I built from the rubble of that loss became more beautiful than anything I could have imagined. I bought a new home, a place that was truly mine, untouched by family legacy or obligation. It wasn't just four walls. It was a symbol. It was proof that I could create my own foundation, my own version of what family should feel like. The most profound lesson I learned was this: family isn't a birthright. It's not automatic access. It's a relationship, like any other, that requires respect, effort, and reciprocity. And love isn't about sacrificing yourself until there's nothing left. Love, at its core, is a choice. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for them is to walk away from the parts of the story that only ever asked you to disappear. I still carry pieces of my family with me, some good, some painful, but now, I carry them by choice, not by obligation. This is my life now. Not the one they handed me, the one I built with both hands, with a steady heart, and with boundaries that no one else gets to redraw but me. If there's one thing this entire journey has taught me, it's that love without boundaries isn't love, it's self-erasure. For years, I thought being a good daughter meant saying yes to everything, fixing everything, and never letting anyone down, even when I was slowly falling apart inside. I believed that sacrificing myself was proof of my loyalty, that if I just gave enough, worked enough, loved enough, I would finally be chosen, finally matter. But here's what I wish someone had told me sooner. When you constantly rescue people from the consequences of their own choices, you aren't helping them grow. You're teaching them that your time, your energy, your life are all disposable. And you're teaching yourself that your needs don't count. Family is important, but family is not a free pass to take from you endlessly. Being related to someone does not give them the right to cross every line, to expect your savings, your time, or your emotional labor without question. Love and respect are not built on blind obligation. They are built on mutual effort, honesty, and reciprocity. I learned that the hard way. When I finally said no, when I stopped bailing them out, I felt guilt. I won't lie. Guilt is heavy, especially when you've been conditioned to believe that self-worth comes from what you can provide for others. But guilt is not the same as wrongdoing. Feeling guilty doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're doing something new, something necessary. If you're in a family where your role has always been the fixer, the provider, the one who holds everything together, I want you to know you're allowed to step back. You're allowed to have limits. You're allowed to put yourself first without being selfish. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. The hardest part isn't walking away, it's believing you're allowed to. But you are. And when you start choosing yourself, you'll discover that the people who truly love you won't disappear when you stop overgiving. They'll meet you at your boundaries. They'll learn to respect the version of you that isn't always available, always exhausted, always fixing. And if they don't, that tells you everything you need to know. Your life is yours. You get to decide where your energy goes. You get to build your own legacy, not one that was handed to you, not one you were guilted into, but one that you choose, with intention, with clarity, and with love for yourself.